Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to a very special show for the Brian Crombie Show on Saga 960 tonight. I have the incredible honor of interviewing tonight Hazel McCallion. Hazel McCallion is, as undoubtedly lots of you know, the former mayor of Mississauga, an incredibly long-serving and wonderful mayor who really built Mississauga into what Mississauga is today. She's received numerous different accolades over the year, and for me, the biggest honor I've ever had is that she called me her friend. She appointed me at one point in time to be chair of the Mississauga Summit and the Western GTA Summit. I had the honor of meeting with her not every week, but quite frequently as we talked about what was happening in Mississauga. And I had the honor of serving as the president of the Mississauga Arts Council, another organization that she was instrumental in founding. Hazel, you're going to be 100 years old in a very short 2 weeks. Tell me, what does that feel like?
Really not any different. It's interesting. Staying at home as I do, like we all have to do, you do sit down and reflect on different things that happen. And what I'm getting is a lot of calls from people especially people that lived in Mississauga and moved away. And some of them I remember when they say, I'm Paul Luke. I lived in Streetsville. Well, I don't remember Paul Luke at all. But anyway, he called. He's now in Stayner, Ontario. And I don't know what he heard, but he said, I had to call you. You'll soon be 100, he said. And that's the type of calls I'm getting from people that have lived in Mississauga and Streetsville and have moved away. And now they're thinking, oh, gee, Hazel's going to be 100.
Well, so it's a pretty illustrious milestone for you. There's no question about it. Hazel, let's go back a little bit if I could. You grew up in the Gaspé, is that correct?
That's right. Port Daniel on the Gaspé Coast. In fact, I have a letter from the mayor of Port Daniel in the book that the Trillium Hospital is producing. It's coming out on February the 12th.
And were you French speaking when you were born and grew up?
No, I had a French name, Journeau, but French Huguenots from, my grandfather came from the Jersey Islands. We were kicked out of France. We were Protestants, kicked out of France for our religion. Many, how many years ago? Way, way back. And a lot of them settled on Guernsey and Jersey. And, but my grandfather never spoke French. My dad never spoke French. My brothers and sisters spoke French, but I didn't stay on the Gaspé Coast that long. So, and I grew up with French kids that all spoke English then. Right. They were allowed to speak English.
And when was it you moved from the Gaspé to Ontario?
I moved to Ontario in 1942. The company I worked for, Canadian Kellogg, engineers and contractors in the petrochemical field, were awarded the wartime project to build a synthetic rubber plant at Sarnia. And they insisted that we had to have an office in Toronto. And so the boss said to me, will you come to Toronto and help me set up an office? So that's how I got up here in 1942. Then when the contract was completed, they said, do you want to go back to Montreal? And they left me in charge of the office. I said, no, I want to stay in Toronto. As I joined St. Michael All Angels Anglican Church on St. Clair Avenue and got involved in the young people's, and I felt at home in Toronto. And as a result, they transferred the head office from Montreal to Toronto so I could continue to represent them.
Now, one of the things that I understand you did a lot of in your teenage years and young adulthood was hockey. Tell us about your career with hockey. How did it start?
Well, it started on the Gaspé Coast, of course. We had a female league on the Gaspé Coast. My two sisters played hockey, and I played hockey. And we exchanged visits between the different locations on the coast by train, by the way, because the roads were not open in those days. And Then when I went to Montreal after graduating from Quebec High School to take my business course in Montreal, I heard about a female hockey league. So I got in touch with them and said, I was interested. So they gave me a tryout. They seemed to think I was doing a pretty good job. So I was engaged by the team known as the Kick team. That was the Kick Cola at the time, sponsored the team. So I was paid $5 a game.
$5 whole dollars a game.
$5 a game.
What position did you play?
That's where my center.
Center. I can imagine you were probably the striker, the person that scored the goals.
I was too small to be a defenseman. No, I was kind of fast on my skates, so I played center for them.
I don't know why I find it completely unsurprising that you were the fast one. So tell me about how many years did you play?
Oh, I played from 40. I just played 41 and part of 42 before I moved to Toronto. When I moved to Toronto, there was no hockey league that I knew of in Toronto. So therefore, my days of playing hockey sort of ended there. And of course, with the war contract from 1942 to 46, I was working on a war contract that had the highest priority in Canada. And that was to build a synthetic rubber plant at Sarnia, because the natural rubber supply had been cut off by the enemy. And no, we had a high priority. So it was interesting.
And I understand that you were the one that everyone trusted to make sure that the numbers all added up.
Oh, yeah, I was the office manager. And I used to have to fly down to New York to convince them to take the budget down to New York to these very highfalutin people at the head office of M.W. Kellogg, New York. We were the Canadian branch of M.W. Kellogg, New York, and convinced them that we needed the money. I didn't have much trouble. I always got it.
I can imagine you did. We're chatting with former Mayor Hazel McCallion. 2 weeks from now, she's going to become 100 years old, and we're just chatting about her life. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Hazel in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. What an unbelievable honor it is for me tonight to interview Hazel McCallion. Hazel McCallion in 2 weeks is going to be 100 years old. And she is the former mayor of Mississauga, as many of you know. She's actually, I believe, Hazel, the former mayor of Streetsville as well, were you not?
That's right. Yeah, and it's hard to get it in. Nobody remembers that I started my career as deputy reeve of Streetsville in 1968, was appointed reeve in 1979, and in 69, and in 1970 ran for the town of Streetsville and was mayor from 70 to 73 when regional government came along. And people don't remember that. I got it in the book. I even have a picture of me as mayor of Streetsville in the Trillium book, because everybody knows I've been mayor of Mississauga, but my beginning was the mayor of Streetsville, 1970 to 73. And we took Streetsville into the city of Mississauga, debt-free, by the way, and took them in with a fire engine that could look after high-rise apartments. And the very day after the city of Mississauga was formed, they stole our fire engine and took it down to Cooksville because the town of Mississauga did not have a fire engine that could look after high-rise apartments. And we had one in Streetsville because the two apartments on the main street of Streetsville was 7 stories. And we felt that with 7 stories, you need a high-rise fire engine. Can you believe that?
I can't.
It's in the book, of course, that Bob Bria wrote.
I understand that you initially were opposed to the amalgamation of all the different towns in Mississauga to create Mississauga. Is that correct?
Yes, very much opposed. Bill Davis will remember that well, because we invited him to Streetsville one night, to the Streetsville Arena. And I think he got out alive. That's all I can say. He remembers it well. In fact, I got to tell you that the mayor of Brampton invited me the night that they presented the key of the city to Bill Davis. And every time Bill Davis was at a function that I was in attendance, he would say, you know, she would have never been mayor of Mississauga if I had not brought in regional government, which is true. So I said, Bill, I want to thank you for creating regional government, and therefore mayor of Streetsville, and the Streetsville community could take over Mississauga and build it into the 6th largest city in Canada. Not bad, eh, for a small community.
So it was a takeover of Mississauga by Streetsville. But I initially understood that the reason why you didn't want it is because you felt Streetsville was such a tight community, and you were worried that Streetsville would lose some of that community feel. But you created a community feel across Mississauga, did you not?
Yeah, we were concerned. We knew. No, we did a boundary study. We ordered a boundary study by a professional company to see how Streetsville could expand, because we were surrounded by the town of Mississauga. And we knew we could not exist financially, et cetera, based on our present land that we occupied. But the province wouldn't go for it. We wanted to expand. I remember well, and I'll tell you this joke. Chrysler plant was built in Mississauga, the parts department plant up on Mississauga Road. It was built in the town of Mississauga on the west side of Mississauga Road. And Streetsville Streetsville is on the east side. They built the plant, but town of Mississauga forgot they had no water supply. So the president of Chrysler approached me and said, is there any way that Streetsville could supply water to us? Which we did, because as far as we were concerned, the Chrysler plant was a great asset to Streetsville, even though it was in the town of Mississauga. I met him a few years later, in which he helped me get a Lebanese, get his landed residence status renewed. He was assistant to the Minister of Immigration in Ottawa. Can you believe it? I walked into his office and he said, gee, I haven't seen you for a long time, but I remember when you gave us water. I said, water? And then he said, the Chrysler plant. Oh, some interesting studies, I can tell you, interesting.
Now, when Mississauga was created, you weren't mayor initially, but you ultimately became mayor. And I understand that you were perceived as one of the reformers against the establishment at that time. Is that correct?
Very much so. We knew that Mississauga was not well run. The town of Mississauga. We were concerned about the relationship between the developers and the town. And I sat there, I remember sitting from 1974 to 77 as a counselor. And then I said, I can't make the changes, obviously, that has to be made, because the rest of the town of Mississauga councillors were not prepared to accept it. So I said, well, I'm either going to go up as mayor or I'm going to go out, one or the other. And that's how I decided to run for mayor in 1978.
And tell us about that election. Who was your opposition?
Ron Searle.
He was the mayor at the time.
Yeah, Mayor Dobkin defeated Chick Murray, and Dr. Dobkin became the first mayor, and then Ron Searle defeated Dr. Dobkin, and then I was the third mayor to defeat Ron Searle.
And that was quite a close election, I understand. It was the closest election of almost all the elections you've run in.
Yeah, very close. I think I won by 12,000 votes. And then the next election, Ron Searle ran again, and then I think I defeated him very, very badly. I remember 60,000 votes.
What was the big issue in that election? Was it reform versus the establishment?
Reform versus the establishment and management. See, I took Streetsville in debt-free. And, my whole approach was good management, that you got to run the municipality like you run a business, but there are certain things you can't do in running, using the business approach, but you can apply a lot of business principles to government. That's the problem today, that there's a lack of the business approach. Value for tax dollar, giving the people an opportunity to have their voice. I mean, that was something very, very important. All those things are so important. Common sense.
Now, you were elected in 1978 by only 3,000 votes, but in 1979, the Mississauga Trail derailment occurred, and I think that you became renowned across the country, if not across the world, for how well you handled that emergency. And I think that after that, you were unassailable as a leader. Tell us a little bit about that derailment. How did you find out about it?
I went to bed about 10:30 that night, and my son woke me up and said, "Mom, I think the city hall is blown up." He got up on the roof of our house. We lived on Britannia Road at that time. And he said, "Oh, the flames, the fire, and etc." So anyway, in about 10 or 15 minutes, Gord Bentley, who was our fire chief, was our fire chief in Streetsville, and he took over the head of the fire department in Mississauga when we amalgamated. He called me and said, "There's a big derailment at Mavis Road." He said, the police have evacuated all the people within a major distance of Mavis Road in their night clothes. And Square One opened up to take them. And so the police wouldn't even let them get dressed. They said, "You got to get out, out you go." And their buses were there to take them to Square One. So I went down to Square One where the people were. It wasn't necessary for me to go to the site of the incident because the police and fire would be looking after that, as capable as they are. And I talked to the people. They were there in their night clothes. They left without their prescriptions. So drugstores had to open up to fill their prescriptions of people. Babes in arms, no feeding. Drugstores provided the food for the babies, etc. It was quite an operation when I think of it.
The largest peacetime evacuation in Canadian history, I understand.
In North America at the time. In North America. The next one that took over is that big flood in Florida or down south in
New Orleans, maybe? Katrina?
Yeah. That was the next large. We were the largest evacuation, 230,000 people.
230,000 people?
Yeah.
Gosh, that sounds like the whole population of Mississauga.
Well, no, and we didn't evacuate Streetsville or Malton.
And how long were people out of their homes?
Pardon?
How long were people out of their homes?
Well, some of them were out for a week. And we let them back gradually based on the chlorine emitted from the hole in the chlorine tank, because chlorine is deadly.
Yep.
And, our fire department checked every valley to see if there was any chlorine in the valleys, because when the propane tank hit the chlorine tank, it created a huge hole. And thank God it did in one way, because, or one way, there was some advantage to it, because I forget how many tons of chlorine went up in the air. And then they were concerned as to where it would come down. So the fire department checked every valley anywhere near Mavis Road for any chlorine.
People were really worried. People were fearful. People were concerned. And your leadership really gave people confidence. People felt comfortable that that you were in charge and that you would get them those prescriptions and that you would shepherd them through this emergency. What did you feel like? Were you scared, or how did you feel as a leader during that time period?
Well, first of all, I never went to bed for 3 nights. In fact, my son got all worried and came down to find out how I was. Paul, he was really upset as to whether Mother had never come home after she had to go to square one. No, I had, it's a team approach. Gord Bentley was the fire chief. Erskine was the OPP commissioner. Roy McMurtry came out. The police chief. It was a team approach. You got to work together. The province came. We finally, with a call I made to Dan Asankowski, I really tore him off, because they had sent nobody from Ottawa down to help us with this major derailment, which the railways report to the federal government. They don't report to the provincial government. But anyway, it was a team approach. There's a picture in the book of Gord Bentley, Erskine, the fire chief, the police chief, etc. Because we worked together. And one of the successes of the derailment was communication with the people. We kept them fully informed. We held back nothing. We told them exactly what was happening, what the dangers were, and what we were doing. And in fact, we followed the press to make sure they were not highlighting or exaggerating the situation. So we had somebody follow the press, both the printed press and the TV and radio, to make sure that the communication with the people. That's one thing with this pandemic that I'm extremely disappointed, is the communication. They've completely depended on TV to communicate with the people. I have not received one piece of literature in my home, and I'm sure you folks haven't, telling me what I should be doing or shouldn't be doing. During an election, you're snowed with literature coming to your house, and there's been nothing. Not everybody is sitting watching TV. I think they're out working. I think a lot of people, drivers of the bus operations and the people of the cities, are out working. They're not sitting watching TV. And the politicians have completely on TV and the medical profession to provide the information to the people. Is that not right?
I think you're completely right. And I do think that the leadership that you showed, the transparency and the communication in 1979 earned you the title Hurricane Hazel. And I think that you are a great example to politicians and to leaders worldwide. We're chatting tonight with Hazel McCallion, the former mayor of Mississauga, who's turning 100 in 14 days. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Hazel in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to a unbelievably interesting interview that I'm enjoying tonight with Hazel McCallion. Hazel McCallion is the former mayor of Mississauga. She's won so many different awards. I couldn't possibly mention them all. And my biggest honor is that I consider her a friend, someone that I admire, someone who I've had the opportunity to dine with on numerous occasions, and someone who's waved her finger at me and told me what we should be doing from a political standpoint at different times. And so it's been a wonderful honor getting to know you, Madam Mayor, Madam Former Mayor, Chancellor, whatever your right title is, over the years. Let me go back a little bit, if I could, Hazel. You told us earlier that getting involved in the Anglican youth organization was important to you. I understand faith is very important to you, and I understand you met your husband through that organization. Tell us a little bit about that part of your life, if you could.
I go back to my hometown on the Gaspé Coast, in which my mother was the organist in the St. James Anglican Church, and I went to church with her every Sunday. So therefore, when I went away to Montreal, I looked to connect with the church, and I boarded at 9 Côte St. Edward Road, and Christchurch Anglican Church was just up the road. So I joined it. But later on, I went to, when I got to Toronto, I joined St. Michael All Angels Church, which exists now on St. Clair Avenue. I boarded with a United Church family, and she said, "You're an Anglican. You got to go down to St. Michael All Angels and join the Young People's Association." So I did. And I say that's one of the reasons why I wanted to stay in Toronto, was because of my association with the young people at St. Michael All Angels. And then I got involved in the AYPA, and then finally ended up as the first female national president of the AYPA. So my church has been, the Anglican Church has been very much a part of my life. I was business manager of the Living Message, a women's national magazine of the Anglican Church, put it on a sound financial basis. It was having financial trouble. So I bailed it out and got it on a sound financial situation. So the church has been very much a part of my life.
And then you met your husband through that organization?
I met my husband through the AYPA. And, you know, as I travel across Canada as mayor, you can't imagine the number of people that would come up to me at meetings I'd attend and say, "You know, I remember you. You were the national president of the AYPA, and I belonged to a certain church." It was a wonderful experience.
Tell us about your marriage. When did you get married? How long were you married?
We were married in 1951, and we were married for 44 years before Sam passed away.
Where was your first date?
First date was at an AYPA deanery meeting in Toronto. All the AYPAs of the different Anglican churches in Toronto got together, and that's where I met Sam. And before I left for Oslo, Norway, to the Second World Conference of Christian Youth, I always joked about it. I asked him to buy me a camera, Kodak 35. So he bought me a camera, and I paid him for it. Then he owned it later in 1951. When we got married, I said, "Well, here's the camera I paid you for, now you own it."
Where did he propose? Or did you propose?
No, he proposed. Well, we met in the AYPA, so we were at many meetings together. And then he used to come and visit me at the place I boarded at the Clark family. They adopted him because they thought he was such a nice guy. And so I can't remember our first date, but I'm sure it would have been at an AYPA meeting, because we couldn't afford to buy lunches or dinners in those days.
Where did you get married?
People had no money. Pardon?
Where did you get married?
51, at St. Michael All Angels Church. Yeah.
And he was a printer, I understand.
Yeah. Well, he was a photographer first. And then he started working for a printing ink company in Toronto, and I worked for Canadian Kellogg. We drove to Toronto together. And then he decided to set up, he learned a lot about the printing industry with the company. So he started to set up a printing company. And the first press he bought, he operated it from our home, if you can imagine. It was not a big press, of course. And he operated it in one of the rooms. And then we built the plant on Faulkner Drive, 24 Faulkner Drive.
Hazel, you've been a pioneer for females in business and in politics and in hockey. You were an office manager at a very young age. You told me just now that you were very involved in the Anglican youth organizations, a president of those organizations as a female. You were a female mayor of both Streetsville and as of Mississauga. How did you all do that generations before it became, we just this past year had the first female vice president of the United States elected. How did you do that?
Well, I never had trouble working with male people, with men. It was the two past presidents of the AYPA that decided, with the work that I had done as a member of the executive, that I should become president. It was two men that decided that. They felt, she's got it, she could do it. And that's the way it went along, and I've never had any trouble working with men. People say, well, why? I said, well, I don't know. I respect them, but I also want to know that they better respect me as a woman, that I can do anything they can do.
And so
I think it's confidence in yourself.
Confidence in yourself and respecting each other.
And respect for each other. I mean, two men made me arrange for me to be the president of the Anglican Young People's Association. Des Morton was the one decided that I should be mayor of Mississauga. He was my campaign manager, and he's a very, very dominant NDPer. Of course, the committee that helped me get elected mayor of Mississauga, there was a Liberal, a Conservative, and Des Morton as chairman.
You've been able to bridge different political spectrum for a long period of time. I think most people have described you as a fiscal conservative, but I was actually in the box at the provincial leadership where you were endorsed Kathleen Wynne. Tell me about your politics.
Well, my husband always described it. I thought it was cute. He said, she's basically conservative with a liberal point of view, a great social conscience, and looking for a lot of reform in government.
Fiscal conservatism has been one of your points. You've talked on numerous occasions about balancing the budget, debt-free, et cetera. And Mississauga for a long period of time was debt-free, and you prided yourself on that. Why was that so important?
Well, I came up the hard way. I was a depression kid. I came up the hard way, and my parents taught me the value of money. They had none. They couldn't send me to college or university. And my two sisters put me through high school in my business course. One was a teacher and one was a nurse attendant. And they paid for me to go to high school in Quebec City. They paid for my business course in Montreal. And then I started to work. I got $12 a week, paid $8 board, $2 for transportation, and I put $2 away in the bank. I learned that money, that you have to work hard to acquire it, but you better also, as I've said, and I'm sure, Brian, you've heard me say, and Ron, that I spend the taxpayers' money like I spend my own, which is seldom. And
Seldom.
therefore, you know, you got to value the dollar. I couldn't phone home and when I was in Montreal and say, Mom and Dad, can you send me some money? They had none to send me. So you struggle on your own, and you got to make it on your own. I didn't have, as I say, a college. I couldn't go to university. So I decided, well, I'm going to make it on my own. And it can be accomplished.
In the past...
but it's determination, hard work, giving a lot of time, and the people that help you along the way. I had 2 teeth broken off when I played this silly sport at school. The lady I boarded with wanted to have my teeth fixed. And I said, I don't have any money. I only have money to pay. She paid to have my teeth fixed. And I paid her back $2 a week. You know, those are the things, the people that help you along the way. You don't do it alone. You don't accomplish anything alone. It's the people along the way that help you. And I think back on the bosses I had that said, oh, I remember when my boss called me and said, you're going down to New York with the budget. And I said, me? He said, yes. New York, the head office of N.W. Kellogg was surprised when I showed up with the budget.
You've attracted some very impressive people to help you along the way. You know, I think about the Mayor's Gala committees and your campaign committees and the Arts Council. What do you think it is that has attracted so many strong people to support you over the years and help you out?
Because I respect them and I appreciate their contribution. I value their contribution. As I say, starting back, as I said, with my 2 sisters helping me. I could have never done it alone. I don't know how I could have done it alone, but they were earning money and they donated the money to help their baby sister get on their way. So you got to realize that people, you got to respect people, and you got to know that there are people there that have good advice, and they want to help you, and you have to appreciate that. Don't say, oh, I don't need this, I don't need help, I don't need advice, I don't need anything. You can't do that. You got to depend on people. I depended on my family, and through all my years in politics, I've depended on people. It's people.
It's all about people. We're chatting with Hazel McCallion, the former mayor of Mississauga. And in 14 days, she's going to be 100 years old. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. What a fascinating evening chatting with Hazel McCallion, the former mayor of Mississauga. Hazel, was it 36 years that you were the mayor?
36? Well, and 3 years as mayor of Streetsville. So that's 39 as a mayor.
And I was reading a report of you when you were 90 that said that you were physically active and your cognitive abilities were excellent. You're 100 or almost. What's the secret to your success in health and intellect?
Well, you know, I am asked that question so often. I think it goes back to my childhood. I think it has a lot to do with it. I grew up on a farm. We were well fed as kids. We didn't have new clothes. I used to look at the Eaton's catalog and just say, oh my, all those beautiful things that I can't have. But, you know, I knew I couldn't have them. That was it. I think I've always been active. As you know, I played baseball, I skied, I tobogganed, I skated. I think good exercise and good food has a lot to do with your health in future years. I mean, I didn't know what a hamburger was till I moved to Montreal. So I never had any
good food, but there's got to be something about, you know, what you're doing in the community and other stuff to keep the brain working so well.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I always wanted, my mother taught me, she was a very proud person. She was a fantastic singer and a pianist. And she was a nurse who graduated from the Montreal General Hospital in 1901. And she taught me to have great pride in yourself. She always said that cleanliness was next to godliness. The other thing she taught me, never tell a lie, because you never have to remember. She taught me so many things that I look back on. And we were so fortunate to have such a wonderful mother, because we wasn't a hospital within 100 miles of our home. And we had only one doctor in the town, and he was an alcoholic. So that wasn't very helpful. So we had a nurse to bring up the family. And so she believed in activities. She believed in good food. I ate a lot of fish, I can tell you, when I was a kid, and loved it. Right out of the water into the frying pan. It was so fresh. Homemade bread, unpasteurized milk.
Hazel, you lived through the Depression. You lived through and led us through the train derailment. You've managed through the financial crises in the last several decades. People are getting tired of this pandemic. People are getting tired of things. What would you say to everybody right now? How do you get through this current situation?
I think it's unfortunate that a certain percentage of people, maybe not large, are not following the regulations. I think we've allowed people into the country should have been cut off long ago. That brings the virus into the country, and especially the new type of virus that we are facing. And vaccine, you know, one thing that I have to say to you and Ron, we got to become as a country more independent of things from other countries. Vaccines should have been in Canada, manufactured right here at the GlaxoSmithKline plant up the road and the AstraZeneca plant. We got to become independent of imports. And that's one thing I like about Doug Ford, that he talks about becoming independent of other countries providing us with what we need. You don't have to take over the world's supply of vaccine, but isn't it unfortunate with all the pharmaceutical companies we have in Mississauga, and there's quite a few, that we have not provided a vaccine in our own country.
Well, I interviewed someone just last week whose office is here in Ontario in Brampton, and a manufacturing plant in Quebec City, and their vaccine is in phase 2, and they're hoping to get approved by the summertime. And they've got a very large supply agreement with the federal government. So I think some of that's happening, but regrettably not as quickly as we'd like. Hazel, if there was a young girl, a young female listening today who dreamt of being you, who dreamt of being mayor of a big city, what would you tell her?
Well, first of all, she has to have confidence in herself. You have to develop that you have the confidence in yourself that you can accomplish things. And then you have to set your mind on making those accomplishments happen. That means hard work, focusing on whatever your vision is and what you want to be, and go for it, just like the Olympians do. I mean, they determine they want to win the gold medal. So they therefore decide, what is the program? How do we accomplish this? And you got to do it in your own mind. And then you go for it. Simple as that.
Confidence number one. And you've spoken several times about people and how critical people are. You've also talked about faith and how faith was so important to you. Anything else you can tell us? confidence, people, faith? The arts have been critically important to you. How come the arts have been so important to you, Hazel?
I think we lost.
Well, I think you look at a city and how do you create a community, which the city is a community. You got to make sure that all the needs of the community, arts, sports, hospital care, community facilities, libraries, schools, universities, colleges, you create a community and you say, what makes up a community so people can live in it and appreciate it and get involved in it and play a major part in developing it. You got to have a vision of a community. I'm so happy that Joe McCarthy, the farmer who came to me way back and said, we need another hospital. He visited me at my home on Britannia Road. He said, Hazel, we need another hospital. Thank God we have the Credit Valley Hospital with this pandemic. I don't know what we would do without it. Think about it. So you have to have a vision of what are the priority needs of a community. Healthcare is extremely important. That's why I chose the trillium to raise the monies to rebuild the Mississauga Hospital, because it's antiquated and it needs to be rebuilt. So you create a vision of what is a community, what are the needs of the community for people to be able to live in it, businesses to operate in it, and organizations to play a major part in making it happen, which organizations in our city have played a major part.
You have to have vision, no question. One of the accolades you're going to undoubtedly on your 100th birthday get numerous is going to be the Mississauga Arts Council is going to have a special tribute to you. Ron Duquette with Mississauga Arts Council. Tell us about this tribute.
Yeah, well, I think it could best be described as a mini documentary, because we're going to take a look at Hazel right from birth through to retirement and pick out the salient points along that road, part of her career and growing up. So we're going to be incorporating that into the show. We've got 13 different performances, everything from opera to jazz to blues to rock, a dance routine. We've got spoken word. So we've covered almost the full gamut, if you will, of arts in the city. And we've brought together just some fabulous performers. We're so blessed in this city to have the kind of talent that we do. And then finally, we're going to have tributes coming in from all over the place. And I'm not going to mention them all because I want Hazel to be surprised. But there are going to be some pretty incredible tributes coming in that evening. And I think she'll enjoy hearing them.
And remind us when it is and how do we log into it?
Yes, it's going to be on February the 14th, Hazel's birthday, Valentine's Day, Hazel McCallion Day in Ontario, 7:30 in the evening. So have a nice early dinner and then sit back and plug that TV in and watch the show. And you can log in. It's a virtual show. You can log in on Facebook or YouTube by simply going to the Mississauga Arts Council website, and you'll be able to link on there.
Hazel McCallion.
The Japanese Cultural Center is delivering me a Japanese dinner on my birthday at 5:00 that day.
Hazel McCallion, in advance, happy birthday. Thank you so much for joining us. That's the Brian Crombie Radio Hour for tonight. Good night, everybody. Good night, Hazel, and happy birthday.
Good night.